Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to a new series of The Health Show here only on the Islam channel with me, Alistair Greener. Every week we will be joined by a health expert within their field who will discuss prevention of health issues that we or our loved ones face. Now, many of these issues are caused by unhealthy lifestyle, so we're going to look at how you can change your health and lifestyle for the better. We'll also be inviting patients to our studios where we'll be talking in depth about some issues that they have faced and, most importantly, how they were able to overcome their problems with the help and support of an expert. So if you suffer from depression, obesity, diabetes, arthritis, or have a lack of fitness motivation, or if you know anybody who does, then tune in each week, as these are just some of the topics we will be covering in this series, as we offer a different viewpoint for our health experts. Now, if you would like any further information on the programme or on any of the topics we're going to discuss, then please do email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv and let us know your thoughts. Now, today we're focusing on Islamic counselling. That's counselling carried out in a deeply spiritual and personal way. Some of the topics we'll be discussing today are the differences between Islamic and mainstream counselling, mental health within the Muslim community, and some of the main issues people need counselling with. To help with today's topic, I would like to welcome Sabnam Daramasi and also Abdullah Maynard, who run an Islamic counselling training service and co-founded the spiritual model of counselling. We're very happy that they've agreed to be with us here today and to discuss the issues related to today's topic and, of course, share their expertise. So thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we will talk to you a little bit more. But first of all, let's hear firsthand exactly what their work is and what Islamic counselling is all about.
I think one thing that really strikes me particularly about the Islamic counselling course is the standard of professionalism that's instilled in us. You know, the ethics, the way that we're taught it, the respect for the client is just phenomenal.
Whenever people ask me what Islamic counselling is about, my simple answer is it teaches us to be human.
In terms of the field of counselling in general and health services, we're moving towards a more evidence-based culture.
There are about 420 different therapeutic models. There's not that many which actually try and work with a person's emotional reality, psychological realities, social reality, and their spiritual reality. It's almost like you can't take your entire self to the therapeutic engagement because there's something that you know is real, you know is important, you know is cool to you, but isn't actually understood or held or accepted by the person you're working with.
I've been interested in counselling and psychology, but nothing that really I felt worked at enough depth in terms of spirituality. And with the Islamic counselling course, there is such a richness in the teachings that are so integral to how we recognise human beings and treat whatever condition or circumstance they may be going through.
The anguish and the heartache that people experience can be helped by having someone to talk to. Whether the anguish is because it's something that specifically relates to cultural aspects of Islam, or whether it's because it's a human problem.
I've experienced the evidence of this, of the significance of this model when working with people who aren't Muslim, who come to an Islamic counsellor because actually, you know something, I went to see X counsellor and I didn't feel I could talk about my spiritual path, my spiritual reality. Yours may be different, but at least I think that there'll be some discussion here.
You know, after studying psychology, which is so focused on the mind, and seeing that, you know, here, this, you know, the heart is recognised, the soul is recognised, I think that's what really drew me. I thought, no, this is looking at the human being in a far more complete way.
It strips you bare of the baggages that you come with, the conditioning that you've had since childhood and even into adulthood. It strips you bare and it asks you to look at the person sitting opposite you completely bare in their raw, natural state, and to just look at their heart, because their heart, that human being, is what you are. You are a mirror to that human being.
In the current climate in the UK, it's something that is desperately needed within the communities. There's a lot of stigma around accessing mental health services.
You know, whether it's because, you know, you're a drug user or your heart is breaking because the man that you love doesn't love you back, you know, or whatever it is, you know, that's not something that can get fixed by somebody saying to you,
Have
well,
patience.
yeah, or pray more. You know, you need to have an understanding of what that praying means and how you can be helped by your own heart.
Now, it's fascinating watching that because many people will be familiar with counselling, but a lot of our viewers won't be familiar with counselling. So could you tell us a little bit about how you would define what counselling is?
So counselling is really about entering into a relationship with somebody who doesn't know you, who isn't part of your family or your friendship group, and therefore has an openness to whatever it is that you might say, a special kind of openness. And someone who's not there to judge you, but to really walk alongside you to help you work out whatever it is that's disturbing you or distressing you in your life.
And that's quite an interesting concept, isn't it, to discuss something with a complete stranger. What are the advantages of that?
Well, I think sometimes with family or friends, people can become very invested in their own agenda, or else be so desperate to help you that they can't stand back enough. And that's quite hard. And sometimes people also don't want to hurt family or friends, so they can't really tell it like it is. And I think it's really important to be able to share the full extent of what's going on for you with no holds barred.
And of course, your focus is on Islamic counselling. What would be the key difference between what people would see as mainstream counselling versus Islamic counselling?
I think it's very simple. Most counselling models really concentrate on what's going on psychologically, emotionally, etc. But as people of faith, our reality isn't just within our minds, it's within our hearts and it's within our relationship with our Lord. And so it's actually important that we engage in a counselling process, that actually takes on our spiritual reality as well as our psychological and emotional.
So will most of the people who come to you, will they be people there will be a spiritual connection to their needs?
Not necessarily. I think it's fair to say that Muslims are a diverse community. Some people are very, very concerned about their practice, some are not. But I think it's something that links us all. It's something that helps us to frame our experience of reality. And it's something which, when it's ignored, actually makes it very, very difficult for us to get a real handle on our reality. So it's not as if in the counselling process we're trying to say, okay, fine, everything that we're talking about really is spiritual. We're talking about the same things that other people are talking about in other counselling relationships. But we are doing that within a way which allows for an extra level of depth where appropriate.
I can imagine one of the challenges will be that when we come to more spiritual matters, some people might be a little bit divided about where do they come and see people like yourselves, or when do they speak to their imam about this, or other people who may be at the mosque or somewhere else who gives them a spiritual leaning to their particular concern. Where does that divide occur, or does it even occur?
I think there's a lot of importance in going to see an imam for spiritual guidance. But often with imams, they're trained in the scholarship of providing answers and spiritual answers. And I think we know in our lives, often we're very conflicted about the spiritual things in themselves, but just life in general is designed in a way, it's designed to really exercise our hearts and our heads. It's supposed to create conflicts and difficulties for us so that we work through them. And I think often people do go to see imams, but still feel stuck and still feel distressed. And we've had many clients that have actually come to us from imams, and even imams themselves come to us because they also experience difficulties in their lives.
And I'm guessing one of the big things for you is just like an imam and most people who are in the business of helping people professionally or in whatever way, the fact that there's an independent confidentiality there probably is of a great help to a lot of people.
I think that confidentiality is key, because I think that in counselling, and I think that in supporting people in a way that's objective, you have to have trust. And there has to be a way in which the person who is sitting there talking about their life, their reality, their strengths and their weaknesses knows that whatever it is that they're saying actually isn't filtering back through somebody to their family or to their colleagues. And this is something that is so critical for all counselling trainings, but it's particularly for Muslims in Islamic counselling, because we live within a small community and there are so many networks.
I was going to say, actually, that's one of the things that I'm very aware of within the Muslim community, is that so often there's a pressure to sort things out within the community, within the family unit. And for some people, the stigma of going outside of that unit can be quite difficult to overcome.
I think it's very natural to feel that stigma. I think it's very natural to be wary of a stranger. I think it's very natural to feel like you'd prefer to be able to share things with friends. And it's hard to be vulnerable in front of people, right? So I think all of those things are very, very natural. But to actually share something and know that that's going to be confidential, and to be able to ask for help, I think is a sign of strength, actually. To have that courage to come forward and say, look, I actually don't know what's wrong. I don't know where to go with all of this.
If I could just add to something. You're going to have to excuse us. We do interrupt each other. I'm not sure you know, but we're actually married. We've been married for many, many years. But if I could just add to that, this thing about stigma, this thing about the difficulty that people have in talking to a stranger, I think our community is also quite small and feels quite marginalised. There was some research done a number of years ago, I can't even remember which city, but effectively it identified that within the Muslim community, only about a third of people would normally, if they had a concern, talk to a mental health professional. A third would talk to an imam, a third would talk to a member of their family. Now, I think that mental health is so critical. We need to be able to access what we need. I don't think that there should be a division between a spiritual approach and an approach which actually takes into consideration what depression actually is.
And mental health, of course, is very much in the focus at the moment. One thing that occurs to me, of course, you're a married couple, so who do you go to? You know, you're both counsellors.
Yeah. Well,
do you go to another counselling service?
Yes, we do, which always makes people really laugh that the counsellors need counsellors. But actually, that's right. You know, counsellors should not be people who are sort of somehow removed and these kind of very holy, kind of pure people that never have conflicts. It's not like that. You know, of course, we go through our own stuff.
And it must be good that you've experienced the process of counselling to have a greater understanding of what people coming to you are going through. Yeah,
exactly, very much so.
I mean, it's essential in terms of professional training. And this would be the case for any model. There are a lot of people who talk about counselling. There are a lot of people who even talk about Islamic counselling. and they don't necessarily come at it from an idea of the rigor and the professionalism that's necessary. But certainly Islamic counsellors that we have trained, that we work with, have received counselling themselves, have received supervision, and it's essential.
Having that understanding, of course, is going to be great. So talk us through the process. Let's say for somebody who's watching right now and they're thinking, actually, this might be a route for me. This might be something that I will find valuable. If someone gets in contact with you, talk me through the process of how you will begin to understand them and help them.
Okay, now, the strangest thing is that the way that we work is very much focused on heart. Every human being, as far as our deen is concerned, is raw. Every human being is the highest of Allah's creation. But at the same time we're human, at the same time we're kind of like, we're not just divine, we're basically mucky, ordinary, everyday people. And ordinary, everyday people have things that go on in their lives. So an Islamic counsellor has to have an ability to be able to see the paradox in front of them, which is that perfection of that human being, that divine aspect, that raw, and also see at the same time that there is stuff going on that isn't tidy, that hasn't worked, that causes that person to question their intention, causes that person to question their actions. And in that paradox, stand beside them, walk beside them, support them to see their own divinity, and support them to actually find their way through.
Now let's maybe, to illustrate this better, perhaps obviously maintaining complete confidentiality, but give me some examples of the sort of things people have come to you to discuss where they've asked for your help, because there's a very good chance that some of the examples you'll give will be the exact same things our viewers are now watching think, yes, I get that.
Yeah. So, for example, and, changing, as you said, some of the details slightly. So, for example, I had a lady who came to me who was in quite a high-flying career. And I think that's important, actually, as an example, because sometimes people think that it's, only people who are in sort of socio-economically deprived would come for counselling, but quite a high-flying career. And really very, very stuck, because her heart was saying to her, this isn't right for me. But her head was saying, I need to stay in this because it's well paid. And it was actually starting to destroy her from the inside. So in working with her, we were helping her to come to that decision, but also helping her to see herself deeply and engage with what it is that she really wanted from her life as a whole.
That's clearly something that many people will go through at whatever level within their career they are. Sometimes, am I in a job for the wrong reason? What about the more personal things, which I can imagine are more difficult to open up because they're going to show that greater level of vulnerability?
Well, I can think of a number of clients, young people, so male, female, adolescents, who've been sitting in the chair and kind of like talking about things like the difficulties they have with their parents, or the difficulties they have balancing the way that they live outside the house, outside of the community, in school, and what has to happen as soon as they come back. And therefore, from that trying to struggle with real questions like, if this is a complex picture of my life right now, what is it I want? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? Do I have to choose between these two things? Can I be both? Do I want to be both?
That's raised actually a very interesting question. What divide do you find between men and women come for counselling, and what's the sort of age range? I presume there's a limit at the bottom end that they must be above a certain age before they can come and see you. But what's the profile is a typical person that would come for counselling?
There is no typical profile. As well as providing training, we also do stuff around providing counselling. So we are in the process of running services, developing services, and certainly in the key service that we work with, or that I chair and manage, we have a cut-off point of no one under 11. However, that doesn't mean that children of 10, 8, 7, 6 don't need counselling. People can experience things which at any age which lead them to be stuck, lead them to have real questions about how to go forward. So there isn't a limit in terms of the age. And I've worked with people in their 60s, I've worked with people in their 70s. Men, women, it's true. Women generally find it easier to open up, generally find it easier to talk, generally find it easier to access things like counselling. But it's also true that if we think about some of the things which are, say, specific to the Muslim community, you have to take on board the fact that a large proportion of Muslims in the UK are refugees. So a lot of people here have experienced serious traumas, violence, sexual violence. So there are issues which are cutting across people's reality, which draw them to a situation in which they know that they need to get a service.
As you say, a complete myriad of different things. I just want to come back to the children for a second.
Yeah.
You're saying, as young as 7, 8, 9. What sort of guidance do you have to go through to ensure that you're safeguarding the children? So, for example, do parents have to be with children to a certain age, or what's the process? Because I presume you're governed by some form of regulation in that.
Okay. In relation to children, and we're talking primarily about people under 16. In relation to children, obviously anyone who's working with them as an Islamic counsellor should have gone through safeguarding training at least to level 2. All of our counsellors are actually safeguarding trained to level 3. And then there's an issue about the Fraser competencies, because there's that grey area of adolescence where you have to be able to determine whether or not you should be talking to a young person with their parent, or whether or not the decisions that they are making need to be honoured in a way in which they require their parent not to be present.
And I can imagine, like so many different things, a lot of really difficult decisions have to be made. Yeah. We'll talk more after the break, but I'm afraid we are going to have to go to a break now. I feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg of the subject. But as I say, it is now time for a short break. And we should stress at this point that should you suffer from any medical problems, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. As I said, we'll be right back after the break, so don't go away. Hello and welcome back to the Health Show, where our topic today is on Islamic counselling. So far, we've discussed with Sabnam and Abdullah some of the main counselled issues and treatment regarding Islamic counselling. Now I'd like to introduce you to 2 students from the Islamic Counselling Diploma course, Sultana Begum and Sandra Ortiz. Hello, ladies, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I'm really interested in how the course operates and what you learn and so on in a short while. But first of all, I was just thinking there in the break, we hear a lot about cognitive behaviour therapy. Tell me a little bit more about that and how that fits in with your line of thinking.
So cognitive behaviour therapy is the therapy that people tend to have heard about. It's been extensively researched. And because of that, I think a lot of people have been directed towards cognitive behaviour therapy. But actually, research is showing that the model is actually not so important. What's important is the relationship between the 2 people. So it's just really to encourage people to feel confident about using other models of counselling and not feel that CBT is the only one that can help.
And looking at counselling itself, it's great to see lots of new people coming into the profession. Perhaps you could first of all tell us, how long does it take to become a counsellor? What's the process of education and qualifications?
Okay, so in our case with Islamic counselling, as with any general Islamic counselling qualification, minimum is around 3 years. So you would start off with an NVQ in level 2, and then you move into the level 3, and then you move into the level 4, which is over 2 years. So all in all, you're talking about between 3 to 4 years, or some people might take it longer, depending on where you are in your life.
And what about beginning the actual process of counselling? Are you sort of eased into it, as it were, with other people, or how does that work, where you become a fully fledged counsellor?
Okay, so at the moment, for example, I'm doing my placement, so I'm still a trainee counsellor, and the idea is that once we've completed like 100 hours of placement work, and we've completed all our portfolios towards the end of level 4, and we pass, then we will be given the qualification of being a therapeutic counsellor, which then gives us a license to go out there and safely practice.
And of course, it gives you a great opportunity to see if this is really for you or not. Once you actually get there with your clients, you get a real understanding of the sort of issues that you could face. Has anything surprised you, or what has intrigued you most about your placement process, where you're starting to hear some of the issues that people are coming to you with?
Okay.
Perhaps what could be a little bit difficult is that people are passing through a specific problem in their lives, which may sound as if it is very present to that time in their lives. But it comes from other aspects, other times, perhaps from their childhood, the way they were growing, something that is very, very much in the back. So at the beginning they come presenting something, but as the relationship starts going deeper and as the person starts feeling trusting the space in which they are, other things start coming. And alhamdulillah, we get a lot of support for these kind of situations that may arise all the way through, in order to be able to contain the person and really be very, very present into what is happening in the relationship with them. Yeah.
And you talked earlier on about having a connection with people. How beneficial is it to have younger people working with you who might relate a little bit better to younger people with all of the issues and concerns that they might have? And actually, do you have younger people who say, actually, I feel more comfortable with a young person who might understand where I'm coming from?
Definitely. I think we always like to sit with somebody that we feel is going to be familiar with our issues. And young people have different pressures to the pressures that I had when I was growing up, for example. You know, there's much more issues around social media, and I think it's really important that they sit with somebody who understands them deeply, because if you are going to open up, you don't want to be explaining yourself every 6 seconds. So our counsellors, we encourage people to come from all walks of life, so young, old, from different communities, you know, with different experiences as well. And we encourage people to apply who've maybe not been in the workplace before, as well as people who come from other professions. Very important.
The role of counsellors, I'm sure, has changed tremendously over the last few years and decades. Maybe give us a quick insight of what have you learned from the new generation coming in, and for that matter, what have you learned that maybe hasn't been covered in your course, but experience is very much a teaching model for you. So let's start. What have you learned from the young?
I think these particular students have been absolutely incredible. We give them a really tough time. I think our training has also sort of improved, and we've become a lot more challenging of our students. And what I've found is that the students that we have, these students are so eager and so keen to learn. They really, really want to make a difference. And I find that particularly in this time, actually people seem to almost be, I don't know if idealistic is the right word, but really want to help people, really want to support other people, and are really prepared to look inside themselves and to explore themselves, because that's an important part of the training. So
I was going to say, Nadia, with young people, I feel like, I mean, in my sort of other job, I work as a family mediation worker, so I work with young people, and I find that generally young people are also looking to connect, and like what Shabna was saying earlier, it's the relationship that matters the most. And sometimes with young people, if they feel you're going to actually listen to them, they're going to be heard, you're going to validate their experience, it then age and other things just disappear. It's about the relationship.
And one of the things that actually is relevant, particularly to younger people, is their relationship to their faith.
Yeah.
And obviously we're talking about Islamic counselling here. What sort of things are you experiencing when younger people come to you talking about their faith that maybe they're not, for whatever reason, talking to their imam or people within their family, but actually this is very much a core part of what Islamic counselling is all about?
That's such an important issue. I'm glad you sort of brought it up. I think with Islamic counselling, we need to emphasise that it's a place where you can come and talk about anything. There are no taboo subjects in Islamic counselling, and it's our job to help people to feel safe and comfortable and able to trust that. So I think particularly for young people where maybe they can't talk to their parents, maybe they can't talk to their friends even, maybe they can't talk to their teachers or other people in authority. So being able to talk about, look, I've had so many clients who've come to me and sort of said, I'm in a relationship, I'm in an intimate relationship, but I'm not married, or I'm considering one, or, I've been brokenhearted and I'm 16, I've lost, the person, and they're experiencing really a bereavement, right? But there isn't anywhere they can go to talk to about that. Or, I'm extremely spiritual person, but I feel myself being seduced by this situation, or I've made a mistake in my past and I want to make amends. Thousands and thousands of things that are just not so easy to talk about elsewhere.
And I want to come back to this subject because obviously in your counselling you will have done mainstream training, things that will have been in common with many forms of counselling. But coming to the specifics of Islamic counselling, what are the sort of things that make you a little bit more qualified to deal with those kind of issues when people are connecting with their faith, when their faith maybe is being brought into question in terms of how they feel? Tell me more about the Islamic aspect of it.
It's a very important question because there seems to be we are trained to hear both parts that a Muslim person might bring. There is the aspect of the cultural part of Islam, which with our interactions with our peer mates, we come to learn because our peer mates come from different places. There can be Turkish, or there can be born here in England, being British, or from different places, but there is always a cultural aspect, an Islamic aspect, very, very particular, specific culture. And we are trained to listen to that diversity and really be very respectful towards that and work with that. In the other hand, we are trained to listen to the soul. What is the spiritual aspect of it? So when you are listening to the person, that's what you are hearing. You are hearing their spirituality. And the other is the way that the spirituality is dressed up. So the person may be having a conflict with the expression of Islam that they are following or that they learn from their family, but they may be able to experience something more soulful while being in the relationship with a counselor, because the person is, the counselor that is with them is able to listen to the soul, or to listen what is the expression of their spirituality, and really try to find a way to bring that into equilibrium, into balance.
So basically people who are watching should feel that, yes, they can talk spiritual matters, but it's not a cornerstone of necessarily what you do. You will help them in that area if they like, but you're not going to, because some people might feel that actually you're just going to be an extension of their mosque.
Yeah, no, not at all. How we see it is that spirituality underpins everything. And so hopefully you will feel when you meet an Islamic counsellor, maybe people watching will sense that there's a different kind of a presence and a different feel to it, but not that there is anything that you can't say or that will be judged.
I know I'm really asking how long's a piece of string here, but what's the typical length of session that somebody will have? How many sessions will they have? And what about people coming back to you, so maybe taking a break and coming back? What's the sort of typical kind of course that someone would undergo?
Yeah, so normally sessions are 50 minutes, an hour long. And when people come, what we sort of suggest is have this first session, and then we can decide whether this is the right thing for you, first of all. So it's very important for people not to feel like they're going to be trapped in this sort of never-ending therapy. But that they're in charge and that they can make that decision, or we can make that decision together. And then normally what I do, and all counsellors work differently, but I think probably we have a similar sort of basis, is that I normally sort of say, well, let's look at, say, 6 sessions, right? And, you know, it's up to you. You can have 3 or 4 or whatever, but let's look at 6 sessions. And by that time, you can then review it and see, do I need more? Because people need to get a feel for it as well.
And people can they take a break for a while and come back? And I'm thinking that maybe if someone you've seen regularly over a number of years, actually that's really great, because you feel you know them, you have that connection that you were talking about, and you can pick up a lot easier from where you left off.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it comes back to having a relationship with somebody, doesn't it? And I've had clients who I've seen for years, and some people that I've seen for 2 sessions. It just really depends. But again, very, very important that you feel that this person is there for you, you know, and that you can actually say, I need a break, I need to stop. I'd like to kind of be able to come back, all of those things.
I was just going to say, like, you know, the question you were saying about it being an extension of the mosque, the counselling relationship is such a totally different place, because with an imam, people might go to an imam, but they might have issues around feeling embarrassed, or what would my imam think? And so they might have a lot of issues around those kind of things. The idea of counselling is they come to someone who's going to offer them confidentiality, who's going to listen to them without judgment, and who's going to accept them fully. Because with counselling, what it is, it's important for the person to feel safe and to trust that space between them and the counsellor.
Coming to you as students, and very briefly perhaps, we've got viewers who might be watching thinking, actually this sounds like a career that I could get into. I'm quite fascinated and quite interested in it. Maybe they've got some personal experiences, somebody in the family that is driving them to want to help others. So very briefly, could you tell us your story of how you got into counselling, what motivated you to get into counselling?
So, like, for me, my background was very, very different. I was actually involved in community activism, like, really heavily. Where I live, I was involved with local politics. I was like all about saving the world. And so when I first came up into a counselling course, it was entirely just to develop the skills so I can go back and work with some of the problems I've seen in the community. But what happened through the course of that is I actually started to learn about myself. And remember coming onto the course on the first day saying 90% of the reason I'm there is for others. By the time I got to level 4, I was like 90% of the reason I'm there is for myself. And
they often say, don't they, that you help yourself as much as others.
And the interesting thing about counselling is that you have to work on yourself. So me as a trainee counsellor, I have to work through so many different layers of myself. So if I am going to be there present with someone, I need to have worked through some of my own stuff that's gone on from childhood, you know, the layers and layers. And then I'm able to be actually fully available to a client. And this is what's interesting about the counselling course, is that it takes you to so many different dimensions within yourself, things that you didn't even realise within yourself. It's like earlier when you were saying that clients come to you, they reveal one aspect, and then after a period of time you realise there's layers and layers. It's the same on a counselling course, you know, so many different aspects of you come out. And that's the amazing thing, that the course actually holds you, it contains you, it allows you to work through those layers. So then at the end come out being able to be in a position where you can actually hold yourself and then be ready to hold another person.
And how about you, Sandra? Have you discovered a huge amount about yourself that you never were expecting to?
Yes, certainly, yes, in every single step. The way, I got asked this question every time that I went into another level, and I have always asked myself, why did I get into Islamic counselling? I will say it was a movement of the heart, definitely. I started doing holistic therapies, and then I saw in Facebook, that's what it was. I saw something that came, and it just sounded right. And it is kind of, should I do it? And everything, all of the odds were against me. It's quite far from where I live. And you have to organize, childcare and so many other things. So everything was against me. But there is something, and here I would like to join two questions. There is the intention. In Islamic counseling, we work with intention, and it's one of the most powerful parts. You work in yourself as a counselor, and also you allow that space to really give the person that the opportunity to find what is your intention with this. So, and by setting a start and an end, the intention seems to work its way, you know.
I'd like to finish off in our last few minutes. Believe it or not, the time is running away with us. But just to finish off, really, by talking specifically to people who are watching, who might be considering Islamic counselling, and they're still on the fence slightly. Shall I not? Is this the right method for me? What would you all say to that person, irrespective of their age, whether they're male, female, whoever they are, whatever their background? What would you say to them if they're thinking about it?
Islamic counselling is a deeply transformative spiritual journey. I think you can hear, when I listen to my students, I'm so proud of them, and I can hear the journey that they've been on. I can remember where they started, and I can hear how they sound now, so present and so full of life. And I think with Islamic counselling training, you go on a journey yourself, and you end up with something where you can really help people deeply, you know, not superficially. And that's just a glorious place to be. You won't be disappointed.
Okay. What would you say?
Yeah, and so definitely, I'd say definitely go for it. But obviously, it depends on where you are in your life, right? And I think if your heart's calling you towards it, then just go for it. And at the end of the day, you know what it is? Somehow Allah facilitates. Like, it doesn't matter what you. Sometimes our circumstances might be different, but it's like what Sandra was saying. Once you make the intention, amazing things happen to you. I never actually intended to become a counsellor at all. That wasn't my intention. But by the end of it, I've actually now on my way to becoming a counsellor. So Allah's in control.
So, Sandra, some people might feel scared because they're opening up, they're showing vulnerability that they've managed to sort of keep uptight for a while. For those people who maybe haven't made that intention yet, how would you suggest they sort of just let go a little bit and allow themselves to go forward?
I will say it is in the vulnerability that power is. It is in that surrender. Yeah. It is in those scary places, all of those things that we don't want to express, that we don't want to show. So Islamic counseling starts with building a relationship with yourself, and then it starts building a relationship with the people that you are, and seeing what are your strengths and the strengths of the others. And that's the way that you start experiencing Tawheed, I will say. You start experiencing how each one has certain beauties, certain aspects of their soul that they start coming, and how kind of comes together. And that happens in the relationship as well.
Well,
so
you've shown us
relationship
today,
with yourself starts first. That's the first thing.
And it's gradual, right?
It's gradual. It's very gradual.
Well, I've learned a huge amount today, and it's been fascinating finding out more. And I love the fact of how much you've learned more about yourselves in that whole journey as well. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for. There you have it, some important and really helpful advice on Islamic counselling. I'd like to thank Sabnum, also to Abdullah, who we saw earlier on, and of course to Sandra and Sultana as well, for coming into the show and sharing us with some of these great ideas and giving us a better understanding on this subject. Now, if you would like to know more, then please do email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. And again, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problems, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. I hope you enjoyed this show, but for now, it's goodbye, and we'll see you soon. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. Thank you.